Hey guys, tonight we trudge into a world where the snow bites through every layer you wear. And the wind isn't just cold, it's aggressively judging your life choices. You probably won't survive this without knowing a thing or two about how centuries of Native Americans managed to sleep in tents through freezing winters without turning into human popsicles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's freezing along with me. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a crisp, white world on the Great Plains, where tippy poles jut skyward like skeletal fingers reaching for a cloudless night. The snow crunches beneath your boots, a sharp, brittle sound that makes you wince each time your heel meets the frozen earth. Already, your nose is tingling, lips turning a delicate shade of blue, and you realize that the warmth of your modern coat is only a faint memory compared to the layers of ingenuity waiting inside a proper tipi. Historians still argue whether the original Lakota truly perfected the conical shape for wind resistance, or if it was a happy accident of trial and error. But you don't have time for debates when frost is starting to claim your ears. You peek inside the tipi, and the first thing you notice is the smoke curling lazily from a central fire pit, escaping through a carefully adjusted smoke flap at the apex. There's a faint, almost magical aroma of burning wood, mingling with the earthy scent of dried buffalo hides that line the floor and walls. Fringe anthropologists have suggested, rather boldly, that some tribes even tucked in small heat-retaining stones overnight as tiny hearth extensions, essentially proto-heated blankets. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but it somehow makes sense. Every little inch of trapped heat counts. When the thermometer dives well below zero, your eyes follow the poles, each wrapped with layers of stitched hides, thick and supple, yet flexible enough to handle the occasional gust that shakes the canvas. The walls aren't just for shelter, they're thermal engineering masterpieces. A combination of natural insulation and aerodynamics that traps the sun's daytime warmth and keeps the icy night at bay. You lie down momentarily, pressing your back against the fur-lined floor. The sensation is immediate. Cold no longer bites so sharply, though your fingers and toes are still rebelliously chilly. You remember a quirky fact you read somewhere. Some tipis were even positioned so that the doorway faced east, catching the first rays of morning sun, subtly turning architecture into a natural alarm clock. You notice the subtle hum of night sounds outside wind, scraping over distant hills, the occasional creak of a tree, the whisper of falling snow. Inside, the tipi is a world apart. You can feel the communal energy before anyone even speaks. Sleeping arrangements are strategic, bodies curled against one another like living insulation. Fatigue doesn't just come from the cold. It comes from the relentless effort of moving, hunting, and maintaining warmth all day. But this isn't suffering. It's ritualized survival, honed over generations. You imagine being part of it, hearing the quiet murmurs, the occasional laughter, the protective presence of elders and kin wrapped around you. Historians still argue whether the spiritual significance of sleeping close to the fire extended beyond symbolism, whether it was also a subconscious strategy to share body heat more efficiently. You shrugged. Either way, there's a rhythm here that you can feel. The tipi isn't just a tent. It's a cocoon, a breathing, living instrument of winter endurance. You shift slightly, adjusting your coat, imagining layers of robes and mats under you. The buffalo hide's thick enough to almost numb the sensation of the frozen ground below. Even in your modern clothes, you recognize the elegance in such a simple solution. A faint smile creeps onto your face as you consider the audacity of it all. Humans, bundled in furs, facing nights that would freeze an unprepared soul into rigid misery. Yet here they are, comfortably nestled, singing songs, telling stories, sharing warmth. You think about the fringe claim that some tipis even incorporated small pockets of insulating grasses within the hides, an early version of thermal padding. You snort softly. It sounds ridiculous, but clever survival often borders on ridiculous. And yes, you are probably never going to survive the first night out here without a few centuries of inherited wisdom tucked in your DNA. You settle further, letting the warmth of the fire and communal energy seep into your bones. There's a quiet respect that comes with understanding the precision of this setup, the marriage of utility and comfort. Every stitch, every pole, every flap has a purpose, a story, a lesson whispered through generations. You glance toward the smoke hole, noticing how it lets out just enough to prevent choking but keeps the warmth from escaping. You feel, in a visceral way, the genius of these early engineers. Outside, the snow continues its relentless fall, but inside the tipi, the chill is kept at bay. You can almost hear your modern self groaning at the thought of trudging through this, yet here you are, imagining yourself wrapped in furs, absorbing the centuries of wisdom encoded in this simple, elegant cone. You take a slow breath, letting the scent of wood, hides, and smoke fill your lungs. You understand, maybe, for the first time, that survival isn't just about resisting the cold, it's about anticipating it, welcoming it, and shaping your world around it. You curl slightly, imagining the night stretching on, a canvas of frost and darkness outside, and the soft cocoon of heat inside. A thought flits across your mind. Some Native Americans might have even used small pouches of aromatic herbs tucked near their heads. A quirky fringe tidbit said to soothe dreams and chase away nightmares. You smile at the cleverness and the humanity, the small comforts that transform a tent into a home. Outside, the wind howls, indifferent and unforgiving. Inside, you're warm, safe, and quietly marveling at the ingenuity that made this possible. The first thing you notice when you step closer to a fully constructed tipi is how snug it feels, almost as if the walls themselves are hugging you. You brush your hand over the stitched hides, running your fingers along seams that have been tightened, doubled, and sometimes even reinforced with sinew. Each stitch is a tiny declaration of survival, a whisper from centuries of ancestors who knew that even the smallest gap in the wall could invite a bitter gust inside. You marvel at the skill. The hides are flexible, yet dense, capable of blocking wind that would turn unprotected cheeks into crimson flags of frostbite. Historians still argue whether Plains tribes first perfected this method through trial and error, or through observing nature's own shelters, like the way bison huddle in snowdrifts. Either way, you can't help but admire the ingenuity. The way the hides overlap is brilliant, almost architectural. You lean close to the entrance and watch how the edges of each hide create natural channels, allowing snow to fall harmlessly past instead of piling up where it could crush or chill. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that some tribes even layered hides according to thickness and hair direction, using the outermost layer to shed moisture, while inner layers trap heat. You chuckle softly at the thought it's like a Victorian coat of arms, but warmer, more practical, and without the stiff collars. You realize you're probably standing too close, because the faint aroma of tanned hide fills your nose, earthy and comforting, almost like the scent of history itself. Inside, the walls feel alive. The hides aren't just passive barriers. They adjust slightly with each gust, flexing and dampening the cold before it reaches the center. You can almost hear the debate among scholars about whether this was intentional or serendipitous. Some argue that Native Americans simply discovered the effect over generations, while others insist there was a deliberate understanding of airflow and insulation. You shrug, letting your fingers trace the intricate lacing, imagining generations of hands doing exactly the same thing, perfecting the art of warmth. The poles themselves deserve applause. Long, straight, and stripped of bark, they form the skeleton of the tipi, converging at the top in a graceful cone. Each pole is carefully positioned to bear weight and resist wind, yet flexible enough to bend slightly under heavy snowfall without snapping. You poke at one lightly and feel the tension, an elegant compromise between rigidity and resilience. Some quirky historians have posited that pole placement also helped funnel smoke from the central fire, a kind of primitive HVAC system, which is both hilarious and genius at the same time. You crouch, observing how the hides are pegged to the ground. It's meticulous work, stakes angled precisely, ropes taut, edges tucked under layers of snow for extra grip. One slip, one loose hide, and the whole system could fail in a gust, leaving the inhabitants exposed. You imagine the elders inspecting every seam before nightfall, a ritualized process that blends practical skill with quiet ceremony. You remember the fringe idea that some people even used small patches of moss or grasses tucked under the base for extra insulation, a simple trick that turns the tipi into a thermal fortress. Sunlight filters weakly through the smoke flap, highlighting subtle textures in the hides. The walls glow warmly, a soft amber that belies the storm outside. You reach out, pressing your palm against the surface, feeling the slight give of layered furs beneath your hand. It's tactile proof of centuries of trial and improvement. Every hole mended, every gap minimized, every edge carefully considered. Historians still argue whether the overlapping layers were meant primarily for heat retention or for repelling precipitation. But honestly, you're not sure it matters. The genius is in the result. You move to inspect the doorway. It's often a simple flap, but the way it's anchored and weighted is subtle, almost invisible in its cleverness. Some tribes used extra hide tied to a stone or buried under a mat, preventing wind from sneaking in under the edge. You smirk at the thought. It's like an ancient game of hide-and-seek, with winter itself. A fringe tale suggests that occasionally small animal pelts were used to create curtains within curtains, softening drafts and trapping the tiniest amounts. A bit ridiculous may be, but it seems to work. You can almost feel the warm air pooled inside, defying the frost just beyond the entrance. The interior shape is as crucial as the material. The conical design encourages warm air to rise and circulate, preventing cold pockets from forming near the floor. You hunker down, noticing how your own breath seems to stay suspended for a moment before rising, mixing with the faint haze of smoke and the scent of hides. Historians still argue whether this airflow management was fully understood by the builders, or if it was an intuitive benefit of their chosen structure. Either way, it's a triumph of simple physics and practical observation. You glance around at the carefully arranged interior, from the fire pit in the center to the layered hides along the walls. You can almost see families moving quietly, arranging mats and furs, adjusting each layer to perfection. The attention to detail is staggering. It's not just a tent, it's a climate-controlled sanctuary, a proof that necessity really is the mother of invention. Even as a modern observer, you can't help but feel humbled, imagining the nights spent here, safe and warm while the storm raged relentlessly outside. Finally, you step back and take it all in. The tipi, with its stitched hides, strategically placed poles, and precise layering, is a masterclass in survival. It's practical, elegant, and surprisingly cozy. You catch yourself smiling at the thought that, despite centuries of technology, humans are still learning lessons from these simple structures. Quirky or not, every layer, flap, and seam tells a story of endurance, intelligence, and the audacity to thrive in the coldest of winters. You'll realize, with a soft exhale, that understanding these walls is the first real step toward understanding how anyone could sleep through the harshest nights without succumbing to the frost. You crouch low near the central fire, immediately feeling the gentle heat radiating in concentric waves, soft enough to be comforting but firm enough to ward off frostbite. Smoke curls upward, threading through the adjustable smoke flap at the top of the tipi. leaving a faint acrid tang that you either grow to love or pretend you do. It's mesmerizing how a single flame can orchestrate an entire microclimate, heating not just the air but the hides, mats, and even the bodies pressed around it. Historians still argue whether the exact placement of the fire was learned through experimentation or inspired by spiritual beliefs about the center of life. Either way, the warmth is indisputable. You notice how the fire isn't just plopped in the center. It's carefully managed. Stones circle the base, absorbing and radiating heat long after the flames die down. Some tribes even packed these stones in small cloth pouches, warming them over the fire and slipping them between the blankets for extra nocturnal heta. Fringe tidbit that makes you grin at the ingenuity. You wiggle your fingers near the firelight, testing the radiant warmth, and realize that human innovation doesn't always require electricity. Sometimes it only requires patience, observation, and a little daring around you. The hide walls seem to hum in response to the fire, glowing subtly, radiating a gentle comfort that contradicts the storm whistling outside. You lean back slightly and inhale deeply. There's something almost hypnotic about the mingling scents of wood smoke, tanned hides, and the faint residue of animal oils used to waterproof the structure. Fringe historians argued that these oils weren't only practical, but also acted as a mild aromatic deterrent against insects and pests. You make a mental note, thinking that your modern bug spray might be missing a lesson or two from the past. The fire itself is a living ritual. Elders feed it selectively, not too much to overwhelm the space, not too little to let the chill creep back in. You watch the flames dance, imagining the shadows playing across the tippy walls, throwing silhouettes of poles and hides into abstract shapes. Some tribes sang softly or hummed chants while tending the fire, rhythms that are said to synchronize with breathing patterns and encourage restful sleep. You chuckle, picturing modern humans trying the same tactic with Spotify playlists instead of the cadence of communal song. Historians still debate whether these chants had a spiritual purpose or a purely practical one, but it's undeniable that the sounds, coupled with the fire, create a multisensory cocoon. Your gaze drifts toward the smoke hole at the top, noticing how it's cleverly adjustable. A gentle pull opens the flap to vent more smoke, while a push can trap heat inside. It's like a primitive thermostat, entirely analog and remarkably effective. You imagine fumbling with it in your modern ignorance, learning slowly what your ancestors instinctively knew: control the airflow, control the warmth, survive another night. The communal aspect of the fire is as crucial as the engineering. Bodies curl around it in concentric circles, sharing warmth without words. Each movement is measured, strategic. Toes tuck under thighs, elbows brush shoulders, heads lean lightly against a nearby back. Quirky as it sounds, some elders were known to whisper instructions about optimal positioning, like secret temperature strategies passed down through generations. You can almost see the tiniest ballet of limbs maximizing efficiency, a dance of survival that's invisible to anyone who hasn't slept in a frozen prairie. Night, you extend a hand to the stones around the fire, feeling the residual heat pulse through your palm. A subtle rhythm emerges. The fire flickers, the stones absorb and release, and the hides respond, a symphony of warmth calibrated through experience. Fringe historians have speculated that some families placed extra stones near children or the elderly, a gentle prioritization that shows an understanding of differential vulnerability. You smile at this thought, imagining the tender consideration woven into the fabric of necessity. Smoke and warmth aren't just for comfort. They're practical shields. The smoke keeps insects at bay, masks human scent from predators, and creates a layer of slightly warmer air that reduces heat loss. You lean back, letting your shoulders sink into layered furs, noticing how the fire interacts with the hides, bouncing off walls and diffusing across the floor. Historians still argue whether these techniques were consciously engineered or discovered through trial. But either way, it's effective. You catch yourself observing tiny details, how the ashes are scooped and piled, how small kindling is arranged for slow-burning efficiency, even the orientation of the fire relative to the doorway. Every adjustment has a purpose. The knowledge is embedded in muscle memory and oral tradition, passed down like a sacred recipe. Fringe accounts even suggest that during particularly harsh winters, some tribes would preheat stones during the day and strategically position them near sleeping areas at night. A combination of fire and thermal inertia that sounds ridiculous until you realize it works perfectly. Finally, you lean forward and let your palms hover over the flames, imagining the sheer satisfaction of this setup. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the heat wraps around you like a blanket made of human ingenuity, animal skins, and the careful choreography of survival. You think of how your modern bedroom, with all its insulation and heaters, can't quite replicate the tactile intimacy of a fire-fed tipi. There's a raw, tangible connection here, a lesson in how people once danced with winter itself, rather than simply cursing it. And with that thought, your body begins to relax, lulled by the combined rhythm of fire, smoke, and human warmth. You settle more deeply onto the layered furs and rush mats that cover the floor, instantly feeling a difference between the biting cold of the ground outside and the soft, insulating nest beneath you. Each layer is intentional. Thick buffalo robes closest to the floor, followed by softer deer hides, and topped with woven mats that add both cushioning and thermal resistance. Fringe anthropologists have noted that some tribes even layered grasses or cattail fluff between hides, creating a primitive quilt that trapped air for extra insulation. You wiggle your fingers along the textures, enjoying the surprising comfort, and silently marvel at the ingenuity of people who could make the frozen plains feel almost cozy. The furs aren't just for warmth, they also act as moisture barriers. You can imagine snow crunching along the edge of the tipi, tiny flakes sneaking in, and how the hides absorb or repel them, keeping the inner sanctum dry. Historians still argue whether the hides were always tanned with oils specifically for waterproofing, or if it was an accidental benefit discovered over generations. Either way, you're struck by the practicality. Survival here demands not just heat, but dryness. Because damp skin freezes faster than exposed air. You notice how the mats are carefully positioned. The oldest or most experienced sleepers nearest the center, closest to the fire, while younger or more resilient family members take positions nearer the edges. Body heat radiates, pooling in the center and slowly diffusing outward. Some fringe tales suggest that certain patterns of mat arrangement were even designed to optimize this shared warmth. An almost invisible choreography passed down without a single written diagram. You can almost feel the subtle gradients of heat, the quiet ebb and flow that transforms a cold floor into a living, breathing mattress. You press your hands into the furs and feel the difference in texture and density. Coarse buffalo hair for durability, soft deer hides for touch, cushioned rush mats to trap the last bits of warmth. You remember reading a quirky historical note that some families even tucked small pouches of warmed stones under children's mats, a bit like early hot water bottles, to ensure the littlest one stayed cozy through the night. You chuckle softly, thinking that even centuries ago, human creativity knew no bounds, especially when it came to comfort in the cold. The arrangement of furs and mats also creates layers of insulation between you and the frozen ground, preventing heat from seeping away into the earth. You roll slightly, noticing how your body sinks just enough into the padding without touching the cold dirt below. Historians still argue whether tribes intentionally selected specific hide thicknesses for thermal efficiency or relied purely on availability. But the effect is undeniable. The ground loses its bite, and you can finally imagine what a night of uninterrupted sleep might feel like in the harshest winter. You glance around and see other improvised solutions. Extra furs tucked along walls, hides draped over lower smoke flaps to block drafts. Even small windbreaks fashioned from snow-packed earth just outside the entrance. Fringe sources claim that some families layered animal pelts over one another in a particular sequence. Bear, deer, buffalo too, create different heat retention zones. You smile at the eccentricity, but it's easy to imagine that, in practice, these strategies made a tangible difference, transforming a simple tent into a thermal fortress. The sensory contrast is striking. The outside world howls with wind, crunches with snow, and pierces with frost, while inside, you are enveloped in layers of warmth, cushioned by centuries of trial and error. Every hide has a purpose. Every mat has a function. You lie back, noticing how the furs seem to mold to your body, creating tiny air pockets that trap heat. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that some tribes even positioned mats and furs to create small tunnels of warm air around sleeping individuals. A miniature version of the convection you learned about in school. It sounds over-engineered, but in temperatures that can drop far below zero, every bit counts. You shift slightly, testing how the layers compress and rebound. The combination of fur, mat, and stone warmth creates a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm of comfort. Your body is supported, insulated, and slowly acclimating to the cold world outside without the shock of exposure. Historians still debate whether such arrangements were standardized across tribes or customized according to family size, fire size, and local climate. Either way, it's clear that sleeping in a tipi isn't merely about lying down, it's an art of layering, circulation, and careful placement. Finally, you stretch lightly, imagining the night stretching on. The fire's warmth, combined with these padded layers, creates a cocoon where your body can conserve energy, retain heat, and resist the relentless cold. You notice how the fur's natural oils add another layer of comfort. Subtle scents that calm and soothe, almost like a lullaby in tactile form. You let yourself sink fully into the layers, aware that this combination of hides, mats, and thoughtful arrangement is the very reason why humans could endure nights that modern sensibilities would call unbearable. Outside, the wind continues its relentless chorus, but inside, the layered sanctuary holds firm. You feel a quiet respect for the generations who perfected this system, who turned simple materials into a sophisticated, living, breathing shelter. Even with all your modern knowledge, it's humbling to realize how skill, intuition, and a touch of creativity made freezing winters not just survivable, but almost comfortable. You shift closer to the family group gathered near the fire, feeling a subtle warmth ripple outward as bodies press against one another in a living quilt of shared heat. There's a quiet choreography here, an intuitive understanding of how human bodies radiate warmth and how to position each person to maximize comfort. Children nestle between adults, elders occupy the coziest spots, and the rest of the circle fills in the remaining pockets. Historians still argue whether this communal arrangement evolved purely from practical necessity, or if it was also infused with symbolic meaning, reflecting social hierarchy and kinship values. Either way, the results are tangible. The cold of the outside world becomes almost irrelevant when the warmth of those around you pulses through the tent. You watch a small child curl up near the fire, their small frame barely making a dent in the layers of furs beneath them. And you remember a fringe account suggesting that some tribes would rotate sleeping positions at night to ensure that everyone shared in the warmth of the fire equally. It sounds almost absurd to a modern mind, but it's brilliant, especially in temperatures that could drop well below -20 degrees Celsius. You wiggle your toes against the mat, feeling the shared heat seep through every layer, and you realize that the collective body warmth is just as important as the fire itself. As you settle in, you notice how small gestures like leaning an arm lightly against a neighbor's shoulder or resting a head near another's side aren't just about comfort, they're survival tactics. Every ounce of heat counts, and humans, like any clever species, have learned to share it. Fringe historians suggest that some families even used subtle body positioning strategies at night, like curling in particular directions or overlapping legs in certain patterns, to create micro-heated zones for the most vulnerable. You can't help but smile at the ingenuity, thinking that even without electricity or modern blankets, humans have always found ways to stay warm together. The ambient warmth isn't just from bodies or fire, it's also psychological. The communal presence brings a sense of safety, a buffer against the isolation of the frozen plains. You notice how soft murmurs, low laughter, or even gentle breathing combine to create a comforting soundtrack. Historians still debate whether this sense of security was the primary purpose of communal sleeping or a happy byproduct. But you can feel the effect. The mind warms just as much as the body, easing tension and making sleep possible. You shift again, adjusting slightly to let your shoulders press closer to those next to you. The feeling is surprising. Each breath, each movement, each small gesture subtly shares heat and sustains the fragile balance between comfort and cold. Fringe accounts claim that some tribes would even place the youngest children in the very center of the group, closest to the fire, with adults forming a protective ring around them, a silent demonstration of care and strategy simultaneously. You imagine modern parents attempting the same approach with space heaters, realizing that the ancient method is infinitely more elegant and intimate. The warmth is constant, but dynamic. Bodies shift, stretch, and sigh, and the subtle redistribution of heat keeps everyone comfortable through the night. You notice how the mats and furs absorb, retain, and redistribute body warmth, creating a living feedback system. Historians still argue whether this communal configuration was standardized across tribes or varied according to family size and tipi dimensions, but the principle remains. Sharing heat is as critical as trapping it. You look around at the elders, who recline with practiced ease, their movements minimal yet precise. Some fringe sources suggest they could even sense cold drafts through subtle changes in airflow or temperature, and would subtly adjust their position or the arrangement of furs to compensate. You smile, realizing that experience, observation, and a little ingenuity combine to make communal sleeping both art and science. As the night deepens, the combination of fire, insulated flooring, and shared body heat creates an almost magical cocoon. You notice how even the outer edges of the group, farthest from the fire, benefit from this communal warmth, their furs acting as extensions of the living quilt. You inhale slowly, taking in the mingling scents of hide, smoke, and the faint warmth of skin, feeling a profound connection to those who came before and to the natural strategies they perfected. You stretch slightly, letting the rhythm of shared warmth lull you toward drowsiness. Outside, the wind continues to rattle the tipi and scrape across the snow, but inside, the cocoon of bodies, hides, and careful positioning renders the storm almost irrelevant. The cold is there, yes, but it's a distant concern, kept at bay by the subtle ingenuity of communal survival. Fringe tales suggest that some tribes even sang low lullabies or whispered stories in hushed tones to synchronize breathing and maintain warmth through rhythmic motion. You think about trying it in your modern life and chuckle softly at how much we've lost in our pursuit of isolated comfort. Finally, as you settle into the rhythm of warmth, safety, and shared presence, you realize the profound simplicity of this method. Survival isn't just about individual toughness. It's about collective intelligence, empathy, and the willingness to share heat, space, and trust with those around you, even in the coldest, harshest nights. This human strategy transforms freezing chaos into a haven, a nightly affirmation that connection is as vital as fire and furs. You lie back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of the people around you, the subtle rhythm of shared warmth carrying you into a semi-trance. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the tipi and tossing flakes of snow across the landscape. But inside, the world is quieter, punctuated by soft sounds, low murmurs, the occasional shuffle of furs, the distant pop of wood in the fire. Night rituals begin to unfold subtly around you, almost imperceptibly. A soft chant here, a whispered blessing there, all woven into the fabric of evening survival. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily spiritual or developed as practical methods to soothe restless children and adults. But you feel their effect immediately, a comforting cadence that eases tension and readies the body for sleep. A mother hums softly to her child, a tune that seems improvised yet perfectly attuned to the flickering firelight. Fringe anthropologists have noted that many of these lullabies doubled as subtle cues for body positioning, encouraging children to remain nestled within the warmest part of the communal circle. You listen, mesmerized, realizing that even the simplest nightly songs carried multiple layers of wisdom, emotion, survival, and thermal strategy all entwined. The words themselves, though ancient and often lost to modern ears, resonate with purpose and care, echoing across generations. You glance toward the center of the tipi, where elders perform their own quiet rituals. Some shift small stones within the fire, others adjust mats and furs with precise, almost ritualistic motions, ensuring optimal airflow and heat distribution. A fringe tidbit suggests that certain gestures were believed to invite protective spirits into the tent, combining practicality with spiritual reassurance. You raise an eyebrow at the duality, imagination and necessity merging seamlessly, but admit it's effective. There's a rhythm here, a flow that synchronizes fire, furs, and human presence into a single, living ecosystem. The air hums with these overlapping energies: warmth, smoke, subtle movement, and whispered song. You notice how communal lullabies serve another function. They mask external noises, from snapping ice to prowling predators, helping maintain a sense of calm. Historians still debate whether these were intentional acoustic adaptations or simple traditions, passed down for their comforting effect. But the result is the same: a hushed, almost sacred environment, optimized for rest. You find yourself unconsciously slowing your own breathing to match the gentle cadence of the sounds around you, a soft surrender to the environment. The songs and rituals aren't just auditory, they engage the other senses too. You smell the faint herbal notes mixed with smoke, feel the tactile warmth of shifting bodies and layered furs, and see the subtle interplay of shadows from the fire across the hide walls. Fringe historians even suggest that certain herbs, tucked near the fire or into sleeping mats, acted as mild sedatives or dream aids, transforming the tipi into a holistic sanctuary. You roll slightly, noticing how even minor adjustments in position bring comfort and subtle shifts in heat. Night routines extend beyond sleep cues. Elders often check the fire's intensity, add small twigs for steady warmth, and even share hushed stories that reinforce communal values or explain natural phenomena. You listen to a tale about a wind spirit, imagined to be both mischievous and instructive, weaving a narrative that connects survival, morality, and the mysteries of winter. Fringe accounts claim that these stories were often tied to seasonal cycles, teaching younger members when and how to anticipate changing conditions. A clever blend of oral history and environmental education. As the tipi settles into a quiet rhythm, you sense the cumulative effect of the rituals. Bodies relax into the furs, breaths align with soft melodies, and the fire pulses gently, mirrored by the shared warmth of human contact. You feel the slow, creeping comfort of a night orchestrated with care. Songs, stories, body heat, and smoke converge to create an almost imperceptible safety net against the outside cold. Historians still argue whether this level of planning was conscious or instinctive, but it doesn't matter. The outcome is undeniable. The night stretches on, and you notice subtle patterns. A child shifts, prompting a ripple of body adjustments. An elder hums, bringing attention back to the shared cadence. The fire sparks, releasing tiny bursts of warmth. Each movement is minor, alone, but together they maintain a delicate balance, a dynamic equilibrium that allows humans to thrive even in near-Arctic conditions. You marvel at how every gesture, sound, and scent has evolved into a survival mechanism, proving that culture and necessity can be inseparable partners. You drift toward drowsiness, lulled by the symphony of warmth and ritual. Even fringe details, the aromatic herbs, the precise positioning of mats, the whispered stories combine into a holistic system that ensures comfort, security, and continuity. You realize that night rituals aren't just about keeping people awake or entertained. They are subtle strategies for living in harmony with winter itself. Finally, as your eyelids grow heavy, you let yourself melt into the layers of fur and the shared warmth of the tipi, feeling how rituals, lullabies, and soft stories act as a lullaby, not just for the mind, but for the body too. You are part of a centuries-old tradition, one that transforms the harshest night into an intimate, living lesson in patience, care, and ingenuity. The aroma of a hearty meal drifts toward you, mingling with the scent of smoke and tanned hides, reminding you that winter survival isn't just about fire and furs, it's about food as fuel. You watch quietly as a simmering stew bubbles near the fire, its rich, fatty contents promising energy that will keep bodies warm long after the flames dim. Historians still argue whether these high-calorie meals were scheduled for maximum effect or prepared intuitively, but you can feel the logic. A body well-fed on energy-dense foods is its own heater against the cold. The stew is a mix of buffalo meat, dried vegetables, and whatever else could be preserved through the harsh months. Fringe accounts suggest that some tribes even added small amounts of animal marrow or rendered fat directly into mats or pouches near the fire, ensuring everyone had a portable heat source for later. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but can't deny the genius. Nutrition here isn't gourmet's life insurance, encoded in centuries of observation and necessity. You shift slightly, letting the scent inspire your imagination of how these meals stoke inner fires, literally keeping organs warm and metabolism humming. Children sit cross-legged, dipping into small bowls, their cheeks flushed with warmth and contentment. You notice that meals are often communal, shared from a single pot, which encourages both social cohesion and efficient distribution of calories. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that these shared meals also help regulate body temperatures collectively. The group eats, digests, and radiates heat almost like synchronized You can't help but smile at the thought, imagining a modern dinner party attempting the same effect with a slow cooker. You glance at the elders, who carefully portion fat-rich portions to the most vulnerable first, the children and the elderly, while ensuring no one is left with scraps. Historians still debate whether this prioritization was dictated by custom, health, or a mix of both, but it's immediately obvious that the practice is both pragmatic and compassionate. You imagine yourself learning the same lessons today? Survival isn't just about calories, but about distributing them wisely to maintain the strength of the group. The fire crackles as the stew simmers, casting a flickering glow across the walls of the tipi. You watch small bits of fat rise to the surface, shimmering, and realize that every bite you imagine eating contributes to a cascade of warmth. The energy burned during digestion generates heat, literally fueling the body's fight against the cold. Fringe accounts claim that certain meals were timed just before the coldest hours of the night to maximize this effect. You raise your eyebrows, impressed by the strategic precision of ancient culinary planning. You sip an imagined broth, feeling its conceptual warmth travel through your chest. The ingredients themselves are seasonal and preserved with care: dried berries, smoked meats, and even stored grains that have endured snow and frost. Historians still argue whether the exact composition of winter rations varied by tribe or by geographic location, but the principle is universal. The right combination of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates is essential for survival. You can almost feel the difference between a fatty bite that sends heat through your torso and a dry morsel that does little more than fill your stomach. Beyond nourishment, food also plays a psychological role. The act of preparing, sharing, and eating together strengthens bonds, calms anxieties, and fosters a sense of abundance, even in scarcity. Fringe anthropologists suggest that certain herbs or spices were included, not for taste alone but for their subtle warming effects, a sensory hack embedded in tradition. You breathe in deeply, imagining the comfort of these meals and the way they transform a freezing night into a ritual of both survival and pleasure. You glance around at small gestures, an adult nudging a child to take another spoonful, a whispered reminder to drink slowly, the gentle passing of bowls in a clockwise rotation. Each motion is minor in isolation, yet together they create a system of efficiency and care, maximizing both nutrition and heat retention. Historians still argue whether these routines were consciously planned or evolved organically, but the effect is undeniable. As you imagine finishing your portion, you feel the warmth of digestion slowly radiating outward, mixing with fire and shared body heat. You lie back, sensing how meals become part of the nightly strategy, a deliberate synergy of fire, insulation, and nourishment. Fringe accounts even mention that leftovers were sometimes strategically wrapped in furs and placed near sleeping areas to release heat overnight, a quirky but clever extension of culinary survival tactics. Finally, you let your mind linger on the elegance of it all. Winter survival is a ballet of fire, insulation, shared warmth, and carefully timed meals. You realize that food is not just fuel, it's a crucial cog in a sophisticated system that turns the harshest nights into tolerable, even intimate experiences. You close your eyes briefly, savoring the imagined flavors and the heat spreading through your core, feeling part of a tradition where every bite contributes to life itself. You lean back against the layers of furs and mats, the warmth from the fire and shared bodies seeping into every joint. As the elders begin the night's storytelling, the tales flow smoothly, carried in soft, hypnotic voices that rise and fall like the crackle of the fire itself. You notice how stories here aren't just entertainment, they are vessels of survival, morality, and cultural memory, crafted to teach, amuse, and calm. Historians still argue whether the fantastical elements of these tales were meant to instill awe, impart practical lessons, or simply preserve history, but you can't help but be drawn in by the rhythm and imagery. A story begins about a cunning fox, navigating winter's treacherous landscapes, using clever tricks to outsmart predators and find food. Fringe anthropologists suggest that such stories doubled as mnemonic devices for children, encoding knowledge about animal behavior, safe travel, and environmental hazards into memorable narrative form. You smile at the idea, realizing that these are essentially survival manuals, disguised as bedtime tales. You settle deeper into the furs, letting the cadence of words mingle with the warmth around you, creating a cocoon of learning and comfort simultaneously. The fire casts moving shadows on the hide walls, and as each tale unfolds, the shapes dance in rhythm with the words. You feel a subtle magic in the interplay. The flicker of light mirrors the suspense of the plot, creating a multisensory experience that draws the listener fully into the story. Fringe sources even suggest that specific placements of mats and sleepers were optimized so that everyone could see, hear, and feel the environment of the tale more vividly, enhancing memory and engagement. You imagine the intricate planning behind what might seem like casual storytelling, and it impresses you quietly. You notice how the rhythm of the stories seems to echo the rhythm of winter itself, long nights, shifting winds, and the quiet persistence of snow. Each narrative breathes patience into the listeners, slowing your pulse, easing the tension in your shoulders, and making the cold outside feel even more distant. Historians still debate whether this was intentional, a conscious effort to synchronize body rhythms with narrative flow, or simply an emergent property of repetition and practice. But the effect is undeniable. You can feel the lull as your eyelids grow heavy, gently tugged by the cadence of voice, fire, and shared space. Some stories are humorous, about mischievous spirits or trickster animals, eliciting soft chuckles that ripple across the sleeping circle. Fringe anthropologists point out that laughter is another form of heat. It increases circulation, generates warmth, and strengthens social bonds. You feel it instantly, a subtle warmth spreading through your chest and even your fingers. The communal enjoyment of narrative becomes yet another layer in the holistic system of winter survival. Emotional comfort feeding physical resilience. Other tales carry warnings, disguised as myth. You listen to a story about a wandering hunter who ignored the wind's warning and became trapped outside. A cautionary tale, wrapped in vivid imagery. Historians still argue whether these narratives were primarily cautionary or metaphorical. But you can see both functions coexisting. The story plants awareness in the mind of the listener while keeping the night entertaining, turning education into a shared, almost unconscious experience. You feel the intimate tension of attention and warmth. Children lean closer to the elders. Adults shift slightly to catch every word, maximizing auditory clarity while maintaining heat circulation. Fringe accounts suggest that some storytellers would vary their tone and cadence to subtly signal rest points or transitions in the narrative, a technique that keeps listeners alert yet relaxed, primed for sleep. You marvel at the subtlety, recognizing that storytelling here is a form of environmental management as much as it is cultural expression. Outside, the wind pounds the tipi, rattling its walls and lifting drifts of snow. But inside, the synchronized warmth of body, fire, and narrative shields you. Each story, each flick of a page of memory. You feel the night stretching long and quiet, a soft cocoon of warmth, shadows, and slow breaths surrounding you. The fire has dimmed to gentle embers, casting a muted glow across the hide walls. Outside, the wind rages relentlessly, snow swirling against the tipi's taut hides. But inside, the delicate balance of heat, insulation, and human presence has created a sanctuary that feels almost impervious. Historians still argue whether every element from fire placement to body positioning was meticulously planned or evolved through observation. But the effect is undeniable. Survival in its purest, most intimate form. You roll slightly onto your side, feeling the soft compression of layered furs beneath you, and realize that the combination of fire warmth, insulated flooring, and shared body heat has produced a living thermal system. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that some families would even strategically place warmed stones near sleeping areas to enhance overnight heat retention, creating small hotspots for the most vulnerable. It seems excessive, perhaps even quirky, but in the dead of winter, every bit of warmth counts. The communal breathing around you forms a rhythmic, almost hypnotic cadence. Children sigh, elders shift minutely, and even the pet soar. Small animals sometimes brought inside for warmth contribute to the living system of shared heat. You notice how every subtle movement redistributes energy, a silent choreography that sustains warmth for all. Historians still debate whether these practices were consciously taught or intuitively learned, but the result is clear. Collective human presence is as crucial as any fire or insulation. You reach a hand toward the embers, feeling a final pulse of radiant heat. It's comforting, but the majority of warmth now flows from the bodies around you, the insulated furs beneath you, and the carefully layered mats. Fringe accounts suggest that in some particularly harsh winters, families would rotate sleeping positions halfway through the night, allowing everyone a turn near the phyrodynamic system of thermal equity. You chuckle quietly, imagining this nocturnal relay race of warmth, and admire the subtle sophistication behind it. Your eyes drift over the walls, the smoke-stained hides glowing faintly in the dim light. You consider how many generations perfected these practices. Stitching hides, layering furs, arranging mats, tending the fire, preparing high-calorie meals, sharing warmth, and weaving stories. Each act, no matter how small, contributes to the overall resilience of the group. Historians still argue whether these methods were transmitted as formal instruction or simply absorbed by observation, but it's evident that every detail has survival encoded in it. The night deepens, and you let your mind follow the soft contours of the tipi's interior, noticing how the smoke hole above subtly vents excess heat and smoke while maintaining warmth. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that minor adjustments to the flap were a nightly ritual, a blend of comfort and safety. You marvel at the ingenuity. Every action, from fire tending to flap adjustment, contributes to a living, breathing system of survival. You focus on the quiet murmurs, low laughter, and soft rustle of furs. Even the smallest gestures, tucking a child closer, adjusting a mat, passing a warmed stone are acts of care and preservation. These micro-actions form a network of heat and security, reinforcing both physical survival and emotional well-being. Historians still debate the extent to which these were deliberate strategies versus intuitive habits. But the effect is tangible. The cold outside may rage, but inside, life continues in comfort. The fire's embers glow faintly, rhythmic and steady, as if echoing the synchronized breathing of the people around you. Fringe tales even suggest that some families would hum softly or chant in low tones to harmonize the group's energy and maintain morale. It's a beautiful thought, human ingenuity expressed, not just in construction, meals, or insulation, but in sound and rhythm, creating subtle warmth and reassurance. You let yourself drift, sensing the protective rhythm of body heat, fire, and shared ritual. You feel the layers beneath you, the furs, mats, and stones, yielding and adjusting as if alive, a tactile affirmation of centuries of survival knowledge. Outside, the storm continues, but the combination of fire, insulation, communal warmth, storytelling, and rituals has created a dynamic, adaptive fortress. You realize that sleeping through winter without freezing isn't magic, it's careful observation, creativity, and community in action. Finally, you close your eyes fully, letting the night's orchestrated warmth, rhythm, and care lull you toward deep sleep. You are part of a lineage of ingenious survival, wrapped in furs, enveloped in shared warmth, and protected by the careful choreography of fire, stone, and story. The cold outside is held at bay, the mind relaxes, and the body sighs in relief. The night stretches longer, soft and steady, as you drift deeper into the warmth of the tipi. Your body sinks into layers of furs and mats, each one absorbing your weight, cushioning every curve, and holding heat like a gentle embrace. The fire's embers glow faintly above, radiating warmth in slow pulses, while the soft rhythm of breathing from the people around you creates a comforting lullaby. Outside, the wind howls and snow piles high, but here, inside, time seems suspended, each second wrapped in the security of human ingenuity. You feel the faint heat of stones tucked strategically beneath the mats, the residual warmth from meals shared hours ago, and the quiet radiance of bodies huddled together. Every element contributes to a delicate equilibrium, a living system of protection against winter's harshness. Shadows from the fire flicker softly against the walls, moving gently with every breath, but they no longer startle you. Instead, they become part of the rhythm, part of the cocoon that allows your mind and body to relax completely. The air is still warm, scented faintly of smoke, tanned hides, and the gentle trace of herbs tucked into furs. You notice how the layers beneath you trap heat and gently redistribute it, so every part of your body feels enveloped. Stories and whispered songs have faded to gentle murmurs. the lull of narrative replaced by the natural cadence of life inside the tipi. Even the smallest adjustments, an elbow nudged here, a mat shifted there, contribute silently to your comfort. Your thoughts slow, softening with each inhalation. The snow outside continues its endless dance, but you are safe, warm, and held in a gentle rhythm that has been perfected over countless winters. There is no urgency, no fear, only the quiet, persistent assurance of survival through care, community, and centuries of wisdom. The night is yours to rest in, each breath a soft reminder of human ingenuity and connection.